Hey everybody, happy Sunday morning. Inside here, it's a little chilly out, but we got a few shot in the cemetery, so that was kind of enjoyable in an unusual sort of way. But we'll do a little Mary Oliver. We'll try to get all three of hers here in one clip because they are all very much interconnected. And a lot of you on the discussion board, which I read very carefully, had a lot of interesting questions and things to say about the black snake. So we'll spend a little time with that one. The black snake. When the black snake flashed onto the morning road and the truck could not swerve, death. That is how it happens. Now he lies looped and useless as an old bicycle tire. I stop the car and carry him into the bushes. He is as cool and gleaming as a braided whip. He's as beautiful and quiet as a dead brother. I leave him under the leaves and drive on, thinking about death. Its suddenness, its terrible weight, its certain coming. Yet, under reason, burns a brighter fire, which the bones have always preferred. It is the story of endless good fortune. It says to oblivion, not me. It is the light at the center of every cell. It is what sent the snake coiling and flowing forward happily all spring through the green leaves before he came to the road. All right, so a lot of you asked about the snake. What is the symbolism of the snake and evil and death? And I hadn't really thought a lot about it because the traditional sort of Garden of Eden snake doesn't really fit with the poem, although she does gain knowledge here. I don't know as it's about good and evil, so I'm going to set that aside and just say, hey, black snake, for most of us it's pretty creepy and kind of the last piece of nature we might identify with. However, in this poem she says a dead brother. She's extremely respectful to the snake. She carries it carefully, its dead body, to the side of the road for a sort of proper burial of sorts in the bushes. So that's what I'm going with right now, and I don't think I've ever had that thought before until you guys asked the question. I think the snake is in some ways the furthest away from us in the greater animal reptiles family. So good question about that. And so that just reinforces the first part of the poem, how respectful she is, even though it's a snake. You know, if it was a squirrel, you know, we'd all understand. But a snake, how respectful she is of it. And then we get into how sudden the death was. Boom, the truck hits it. And then she talks about how sudden death is, how terrible, how certain it is. These are all things that we know. Then we get to the pivot point of the poem, yet. Look for the word yet, but in poems, it's the pivot point. Yet, under reason, now reason happens up here, under reason, down in this area, under reason burns a brighter fire than our thoughts. A brighter fire which the bones have always preferred. It's the story of endless good fortune. It says to oblivion, not me. It's the light at the center of every cell. It's what pushes us forward. So to me, this is actually a very optimistic, very bright poem. It talks about our human drive to move ahead in the face of inevitable death. If all we did was sit around and think about the inevitability of death and then maybe how to avoid it, we would just sit home, right, in a metal box with dried food, which is about the safest, most boring life you could have. Metal box in case there's a tornado or earthquake. But something inside us drives us into life. Now, we all know people who are overly scared of life and too cautious. And we all know people who aren't cautious enough, who drive too fast, who use too many substances, who take too many chances, financially, with their emotions, with the way they handle other people. So there's a very important sort of balance to have, is knowing, it's important to be cautious, to be careful with your money, to drive safely, to be gentle and careful with yourself and other people. And then there's also, you need to have a little life. You need to be bold. You need to be in the arena. You need to take risk in order to get reward. But there's a balance there. And she's trying to highlight this sort of passion, the drive, because if we sat around and thought about death all the time, we wouldn't do anything. So there has to be the drive, but the balance is important. So a very good poem. I think it's a very useful and important. Frankly, I don't find it depressing at all. I'm a little sad for the snake. But she talks about what drives us forward in life. And that is important to always remember. All right, so we'll move on with in Blackwater Woods, which I also think it's on a very similar theme. In Blackwater Woods, look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have learned in my lifetime leads back to this. The fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bodies, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, to let it go. So I think similar to the Black Snake, it's a poem, yes, about loss, but it's also about the drive and what we need to move forward in the face of inevitable loss that we experience and our own inevitable loss of life. The trees are, I think the Blackwater Woods is when water has occasionally floods the woods from beaver or sometimes man-made roads or something like that. And the trees die, but they eventually shed their bark and they become these pieces of silver shooting into the sky. It's very unusual. And so there's this sort of beauty in these petrified trees. And then the rich fragrance of cinnamon, that's the blowing in of spring, the long tapers of cattails bursting forth. And what are they doing when they're bursting forth? They're sending forth seeds. There's fertility happening. And this happens everywhere. Every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. They're all the same. This is happening all over the place. And then we get down to her nice conclusion. How often does a poet give you a nice conclusion at the end of the poem? You have to love what is mortal. People, animals, relationships. You have to love what is mortal. Hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it. And when the time comes to let it go, and then to let it go. So, yeah, those of you who took my short stories class remember the woman who loved the bowl. Very safe to love a bowl, right? But it doesn't bring a lot of meaning or value to your life. So you have to love what the point, the full human experience of love and loss is essential to what it is. You don't want to be happy all the time and safe. You need that. You need that depth that comes with things that might not be as much fun. So two very good poems from Mary Oliver. We'll cut this here because I don't want to run over 15 minutes, my YouTube limit for each post. So we'll cut it here and we'll move on to the visitor.